Hello and welcome to this video where we're going to have a conversation, this little discussion about how to set up a homeschool room. Now, some people talk about a house is not the same as a home. Well, a classroom is not necessarily the same as a room, and we'll kind of talk about that in this video. All right, so where do we start? Got to start at the beginning, which is where? Location, where are you going to go in your house? We got to look at that. We got to talk about that. Once you figure out where you want to be, how are you going to set it up in terms of like workspace and tables and things like that? And then what about the supplies? Where are those going to go? What do you need for supplies? How are you going to store them so things are still not cluttered and all? Then, of course, we want to be talking about the ambiance of the room, right? That could be things like lighting, and do you have pictures and posters? What does that look like, and how are you going to create that right learning atmosphere? And then we want to talk about flexibility, right? Because it's not going to be just a classroom. This is probably in your home or your apartment or what have you. So it's a living space. So that flexibility, how can you make it work for both? We've got to talk about all of those things in this video. So we got to find a location in your house. Now, all kinds of factors play into this, right? How big of a house do you have? Small apartment, small home, bigger home, how many rooms, how many kids, all those things are going to factor in. But one thing you really want to be thinking about in this location is some separation from like play space, like electronic kind of space, bedroom space, and where you're going to be working, all right? You also need to be kind of, when you think about location, where you can all gather together. So this is typically, you're going to think about like kitchen, living rooms like that, all right? Depending on, again, your house and your space. But that's kind of a general idea when we turn location. You have flexibility within that location, and then you have flexibility for layout. And the layout can really depend on what you're teaching, right? You probably want to have a table space where people can gather as a group, but it would also be beneficial to have spaces where you can have each child work independently, free of distractions. So you want to kind of think about that as you step back and working within the space that you've chosen. How can you best lay this out so there are some workspace, individual, quiet, distraction-free, where kids can work on their own, or even a table group space where you can have discussions, conversations, work as together. Maybe you correct things. Maybe you're working at that space and kids come to you as they need help. All those things you want to begin to kind of figure out and talk about. Resources, right? So now you got to look at your space and go, what do I need in this and where am I going to keep it? What books do I need to have readily available? How best to store these and have these available? What other things like pens and notebooks and papers, and you've got your writing curriculum and math curriculum and history books and all these things, the literature books. Oh man, how am I going to best do this? Creativity is going to be your great guide, right? Maybe, depending on how big of a space you have, kids have to have a little milk crate or something where that's their supply thing, and they bring that down with them. They just keep that up in their bedroom. Maybe you have space where you can stack those up in a nice corner, and each one, that's where it is. It goes there. At the end of the day, it goes there. So you got to kind of step back again, look at that layout, figure out what you need for supplies and how best to store those. Sometimes you might be doing it in a room where some of those supplies are already right there. So from there, you want to think about the flexibility of this space, this room, because you know, when you're done, things need to be put away. It needs to become your living room again, or your kitchen again, or your dining room again, right? So you want to think in terms of that as you lay things out, so it doesn't stay cluttered, and you can function and turn it back into the original purpose of the room as the home was kind of designed, right? That's that flexibility of the room and the layout and how you're storing materials and all those things, right? It's very important. I can't emphasize this enough, is to be able to teach kids to like declutter spaces. So it's really important when you doing this at home because those rooms have another purpose. It's important to recognize that. So let me kind of tell you how this kind of plays out, because even though my wife and I didn't homeschool our kids, we had considered it, but when we finally made the decision that, you know what, in our circumstances, we'll have them go to public school. And we were both working in public school, so that influenced our decision as well. But given that, it still said, all right, our kids are going to have homework. And our kids were young when we made this plan. So I said, all right, we got a great attic space, man. This is a really cool space. We're going to make sure, and it was sort of finished over, but we built in some like study cubicle areas. And then there was still space to maybe have a table where we could gather together. There was a little space I could have my office up there, or my wife, or both of us. We wired it, electricity, got the lighting in, did all that stuff. Well, our kids were pretty young at the time. Now the attic was kind of spooky, right? It was kind of a scary space. They didn't like going up in the attic. Now later on, they actually loved the attic space like I do. It's one of my favorite rooms in the house. And right now it's being utilized as a bedroom, right? It's a great space, but when they were little, not so great. So we had to get flexible, right? Said, all right, they wanted to do things down the living room. So we had to kind of rearrange things, but I also didn't want like the TV going and this stuff going. So we had a little dining area. That's not where the TV was. It was a big area. So that could be where we did homework, right? That became kind of the workspace. That's just that flexibility in our own, looking back going, oh, all right, I'm not going to, we talk about ambiance, right? We need to have the right ambiance of this room, right? Well, that attic didn't have the right ambiance. And you need to think about that when you're setting up the room, right? How does it make people feel? How easy is it to get into that learning state when you choose that location and you choose that setup? Well, the attic didn't have that, right? Now, my son, my kids have taken over that house and are living there, and he started working and does a lot of work with laptop, a lot of stuff that he could just do at home. Well, he had a nice little space set up in his bedroom, but it was his bedroom. He was like up there all the time. And it didn't feel right, didn't feel comfortable. He was having a hard time being productive. He began to realize this isn't the right space. How can I create a better learning space and learning environment, or in this case, workspace, work environment? But the principles were the same. So we looked right back to when they were kids, where they do the work. Let's get a little desk space set up down here, right by the window, by the light, where you like that. The ambiance is nice, right? The lighting's good. That's where his workspace is. So when he's home working now, he's got that little corner set up, and that's his workspace, and it works just fine for him. So that's an example of how this can all play out, not just for your homeschooling your kids, but even for you trying to do work while you're homeschooling your children. I really hope that you take what I had in this video, and if you're going to be homeschooling, really kind of think about everything I shared there and plan it out. And I would encourage you to subscribe, because I'm adding more videos all the time on all kinds of topics. So if you're homeschooling, there's still topics on like academic stuff too, and even athletics and mindset stuff. So there's lots of topics out there. You might be particularly interested in the video, how to plan out your school year, right? You can check out that video today. And once again, subscribe to my videos, my channel, and you can access those other videos, as well as you can find my podcasts as well.